Hey, Alex.
Yes, Sarah?
What's a boundary that's really important to you?
A boundary that's important to me is I just can't wake up before 9 a.m. Sorry,
Yeah,
Sarah.
that's a good one. I know that's a good one because I have the same boundary.
Oh, wow. Well, I guess our kids aren't going to school this year.
Well, that's what the YouTube is for. Welcome to Mistakes Were Made. It's a podcast. It's a podcast.
Just a little podcast.
That's all you need to know.
Just this dumb thing we're doing.
Are you in or are you out?
Decide now.
Yeah, it's a podcast about non-monogamy, and it's for messy people who make messy intros like me. I'm Sarah. I'm a queer, non-monogamous therapist, parent, and writer. And I'm going to go ahead and put a boundary on you, Alex, that if I have to get up before 9 a.m., you have to bring me coffee.
And I'm her husband, Alex. My love knows no boundaries.
Wait, in a good way?
Oh, yeah. All of a sudden, I was like, oh, creepy.
Yeah. Is that cool?
And I'm Jessica, here producing, resident monogamist, and my only boundary is about eating in bed. No eating in bed. No
Never?
crumbs. No crumbs in the sheets.
Sorry, question about that. Not to push back on your boundary immediately. But does that include ice cream?
Why would you eat ice cream in bed?
Wow.
Christ. Okay.
I was just eating ice cream in your bed right before we started recording.
But you know what's funny about this is I my whole life had a very, very strong thing about eating in bed. But then I met Curtis, my husband. This actually happened before we got married, and he's really into making coffee, bringing it back to bed, and maybe bringing a little cookie, pastry, something like that. And I was like, oh shit, this is really great.
Wait,
you don't like doing that?
No coffee in bed?
Oh no, I'm full coffee, crumbs. I spilled an entire glass of juice in my bed last week.
That's good.
So.
There goes that boundary.
Yeah.
Boundaries. They need to be flexible. They change.
Yeah. As you can probably tell, today we are talking about boundaries. It's a term that is bandied about in the zeitgeist, in the culture. And I was realizing that I don't really actually know what it means.
You know what? Nobody does.
And here we are. It seems like also it is a lot of people identify it when I just did a little Google like I do. My pre-episode 15-minute Google sesh. That was longer this time actually, but that a lot of people are like online kind of complaining about people's evoking of boundaries as just sort of toxic, and it's therapy speak. So I thought you as a therapist might want to answer for that, Sarah.
Fucking therapy, just ruining this world.
Explain yourself and your profession.
God, we'd all be fine if therapy speak would just go away.
Exactly. Yeah. We just go back to violating each other's consent all the time.
Yeah, seriously.
And not knowing how we feel.
Yeah, well, I definitely know what you're talking about. I think it's a term that has been, and maybe never has been really well defined, because it's often evoked when someone is just feeling really frustrated, angry, disrespected, or a need isn't being filled, or that they're being mistreated. And because boundary is recognized as there's something, it's becoming profane now, but there was something kind of sacred in the evocation of boundary there for a while. And I suspect I did not do my 15-minute Google sesh right before this episode.
You already know everything. It's okay.
But if I had, I would have looked up when it started becoming in the popular vernacular. And my guess is around Me Too.
Oh.
If I had to just think anecdotally back to when I started thinking about it, I'm sure, and I know therapists were talking about it before then. Yeah. But as far as people just in popular culture discussing it, I wonder if it came along around the same time.
Why do you think that was?
Are you being facetious?
No, I'm not being facetious. It sounds like I'm being obtuse, but it's like, that's a pretty extreme boundary. Like, or like the opposite of extreme. It's a low bar to be like, being sexually assaulted by Harvey Weinstein is, I have a boundary against that.
But like the whole, sorry not to interrupt, but like the whole Me Too thing was about recognizing that stuff. I mean, not the whole thing, but so much of what came out during Me Too was recognizing that stuff, you were allowed to have boundaries around things that like, used to just get called awkward or bad sex or remember there was so much stuff around that, like the Aziz Ansari thing,
right? Or just like
around the same time.
Not being fun, not being nice, not being accommodating, not being pleasing, not being attractive.
The Aziz Ansari thing was where he wanted to do some weird, not necessarily like violent or wrong in any way sex thing with a person, and they weren't into it, and he just kind of didn't respect the
it's
boundary
like,
or the lack of consent or whatever.
I feel like during that era, rape or sexual assault got to be redefined as like, it doesn't have to mean penis and vagina.
Right.
Like it means being sort of like, even like gently coerced or like sort of peer pressured into, but not.
It's violations
This
of
is
autonomy
helpful.
and respect and dignity.
And thus that would like create more of a, like you move the onus of that onto the person who's like receiving that. And like, you're sort of like, you should know what your boundaries are so that you can set them and be like, Aziz, I have a boundary around whatever he wanted to do.
This is all me theorizing a little bit, but if we're running with this idea that we all started talking about boundaries more around 2017 and the rise of the Me Too movement, because we were all talking about consent more. And I think the original statement I made was, for a while in there was something kind of like sacred, powerful, magical that felt like you were evoking when you said certainly consent and also adjacently boundary. And I think that was because there was this idea that, okay, maybe consent violations, there might be a road to consent violations that we need to be more aware of. And that road likely is paved with boundaries or the breaking of boundaries, essentially. And so we were kind of like looking for building more of a cultural like discourse and like language around how we could have found ourselves in a country, in a place where so many people were feeling violated, disrespected, their dignity was under attack all the time. And so this idea that a boundary was a way that you could describe how you did or didn't want to be treated, and you could communicate that to the world. And then it sort of visibilized some of this behavior, some of this treatment, and some of these experiences. So that's kind of my theory. I don't,
God, you guys are so smart.
Thank you. I have a need to be told that I'm smart once every hour. So thank you for fulfilling that.
We just need a recording of me saying that. But moving this into like because all of those things in that context is sort of like a way that you're kind of like distancing yourself from another person. Just like to flesh the idea out. Don't make that face.
I don't like it though. That's it.
I just want to bring it in.
Therapist doesn't like. So go ahead.
In a relationship context or a non-monogamy context, that like all of these examples are like examples where we're sort of like out there in society as a whole, or in the beginning of a relationship or something like that, in the like early stages of pursuit of a relationship. And then I guess I just want to like point towards like, once you're in a relationship, like, okay, how do you have boundaries with another person in a more kind of collaborative way, as opposed to like, this is an exaggeration, but as opposed to being like, I'm putting a boundary on you. Like the cliche is sort of like, I'm putting a boundary on you, Sarah. Don't talk to me anymore. Right.
So that segues us back into why has it pejorated? So what I was saying was like, initially it seemed sort of like magical and sacred and important. And then not immediately, but over the course of the last 5 years or so, now it's sort of like a punchline. And there is this idea that people can take advantage of misunderstanding the concept of boundaries to try and control other people's behaviors and extract what they want from situations. And so the joke or the punchline I think you just evoked was, I'm putting a boundary on you, which is absurd because that's like, obviously you're, that's not a thing.
I love it.
You can't put a boundary on someone, which is what we're going to be unpacking and talking
It's
about.
like one of those nets that fires out of a gun.
I mean, even in the language that's used, you can see that it's being described as an attempt to make someone behave a certain way. And I think that's a common misunderstanding that people have about like functional boundaries, which are, they don't actually have anything to do with you being able to better control the behavior of others. They're entirely about you being in touch with what you can and can't or do or don't want. Can or can't tolerate, do or don't want, and then making decisions based on that self-knowledge and sticking to them. So it's really entirely kind of internal. It doesn't mean you don't communicate them to people so that people can be like brought into that. This is getting kind of abstract. I promise that we're going to like use examples here in a second. But I think that that's why it has pejorated, is that it's like, I am putting the boundary on you that you stop talking to me in this argument because I'm furious, or I'm putting the boundary on you that you chew too loud, or I'm putting the boundary on you that this is shit I have fucking actually
Our children,
heard, right?
That's like,
I really like that.
I'm putting the boundary on you, to get us into the realm of polyamory. I'm putting the boundary on you that you can't fall in love with a partner. I'm putting the boundary on you. Like now we're getting into controlling behavior.
So you're saying that it's just being, the pejoration is coming from it being sort of misused, the terminology being misused, and it just kind of like degenerating back to the same kind of controlling behavior that was probably already, that was the problem in the first place.
And that may be why the conflation with consent, it's like, again, we're kind of just running on my theory based on nothing, but
it's a good theory.
We like it. So we're going to keep going. The conflation with consent is a little bit problematic because a consent violation is like, this is an oversimplification, but I said no and you did it anyway, right? And that is different than a boundary, but you can see how...
Than breaking a boundary?
Than breaking a boundary, I think.
Yeah.
But you can see how these things would be like, live in close neighborhoods,
but like,
and on a
what
spectrum.
is the no? That if the no is the boundary, like,
If I said the no and you did it anyway, then that's
and like in your scenario, the no is like PNV sex maybe, but like the no could be anything.
And maybe like...
I said no, don't come over, and you did it anyway. I said no, don't... I don't know, pet my cat, and you did it anyway.
Right. So there's like some nuance here that I think we're going to spend plenty of time unpacking, and maybe just saying up top that in this realm, there's a lot of gray, and I'm going to set myself up now to not be able to like sort it out cleanly or perfectly, but I'm appreciating that we're kind of like trying to get in here and learn more.
Yeah. Well, and I wanted to ask, because I think we've been talking about that idea that like I'm putting a boundary on you that's going to like determine how you behave, right? Which that's one misconception. But what about, I feel like the other way that boundaries can get received or talked about is like that it's withholding, that it's like, I'm not going to give you this.
Right.
And it feels like that's also not really what it's about, but maybe that's even a harder one to debunk.
Yeah.
Like my boundary is, I don't know. I don't have sex until the third date. So is that me withholding sex from you, or is that me having a boundary around not having sex until I know you better? Anyways.
I mean, yeah, it could be withholding if like I somehow think that I own you and you owe me sex, but otherwise, fuck no. Why would that be withholding? Yeah.
Also, to use this example, if you were like, I have a boundary that I don't have sex until the third date, that's your boundary. You get to decide that, right? If you were like, I have a boundary that for those 3 dates, you're not having sex with anybody else, that's not a boundary. That's you trying to control somebody else's behavior.
Right.
They can still get sex somewhere else. They're just not going to get it from me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, maybe we should talk about some like examples of just like the things that come to mind for us as like what are boundaries that we sort of have to see if we even
Have any?
Having.
Based on some of my relationship experiences this summer, I think that it is pretty funny that I'm coming on this podcast positioned as an expert about this. But okay.
When I was trying to think of this,
Exactly.
Sorry, Alex.
some of the ones that came to mind were like, I have a sort of a boundary about like not dating people who are under about 40. And another one that came to mind was like having a conversation about STI safety before I have sex with a new person. And I also thought about some non-sex relationship ones, I swear. That I don't take phone calls that I don't know who it is. Don't always keep the boundary, but... So just like, I feel like they can be anything. They can be relationship things.
The only time I do that is when I'm desperate to get out of whatever situation I'm in.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
They can be flexible. What about you guys?
I mean, yeah, the phone is such a great example because I feel very strongly and I feel like no guilt about the fact that I will not answer an unknown number. And I also just won't answer an unplanned phone call from almost anybody. Like the two of you, I will, because I know that if you're calling me, we need to talk on the phone, and like it's either an emergency or it's a like, or you're about to buy me a latte, right? And
it's logistical, like immediate logistics.
Immediate logistics. We're going to be done in 2 minutes, or our lives are forever changed and I need to go to the emergency room.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Complete trust that you guys are not going to abuse the privilege.
It's funny because you didn't get your latte this morning because
You should
no
have.
phone
That's what it's
call.
called.
You should have called.
It's interesting on that, like, what is the relationship anarchy? Like, what kind of relationship are you in? Different categories. They should
It's
totally have
wonderful.
one of, like, are you in a relationship where this person would pick up your phone call?
Yeah.
It's
Unannounced.
so real, right? Because most people know. I mean, to the point, like Curtis and I joke about this all the time because we did not talk on the phone until we had been married for 7 months. I think I mentioned this on the podcast before. And he was calling me because our cat had just died. You know, it was like level 11.
Wow.
Yep.
And we probably still, I mean, now we have talked on the phone. We've never talked on the phone just for because we missed each other or whatever. We don't spend that much time apart.
This is funny because I feel like this all derives from boundaries that people of our generation have set with their boomer parents.
Yes.
Like,
Right.
They're all
100%.
about the phone.
Totally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're good at that kind of boundary. That may be it.
But I also feel like there's some tension in my life around how attracted I am to the type of person who would call me and I would pick up and they would be like, do you have time to talk? And how little I ever want to do that. Right. You know, like this is just like there are two wolves inside of me.
Yeah, right.
The one who like really is attracted to people who would call you at like 2 p.m. on a Tuesday and just be like, I'm just feeling sad and wanted to hear your voice. And the wolf inside me that is like, I will never do
I want to
that.
get a text that suggests that idea, but I don't want to get... Although yesterday, for the first time perhaps ever in my life, I got an unsolicited phone call that was just to talk from our friend. And I was like happy to get it. And I had been like, I want to talk to him. And then he called. But then I was like, not right now, bro. But still, I got to stand on principle here and say, I'm going to call you back in 45 minutes.
Okay, I'm about to put some boundaries on y'all now.
All right. Put them.
So I'll find her phone too. I have so much fucking phone trauma. I feel like you want to make fun of therapists speak. Phone trauma sounds like some bullshit therapist speak, but it's true.
Yeah.
I had a partner who made fun of me for this, and I was like, I think that this may be like a generational thing. They're a little bit younger than me, and I'm like, when I was growing up, like there were so many prank phone calls. There were so many like sexual phone calls, like stuff like that happened to me a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that if you just didn't grow up with like the house phone and like that particular type of phone culture, maybe you just don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we lacked the technology to screen who was communicating.
Yeah,
with
and
us
so it
at
was
any
like you
given
just
time.
had to pick it up and there was like a heavy breather on the other
was a
side, or you're
real
fucking
boundary
bully
problem. Yeah.
from fourth grade or some shit. Like that was always happening.
Yeah.
So yes, boomer parents, but also just like fucking abusive ass 80s culture.
Yes.
It's fucking terrible.
Gross.
Anyway.
Okay. This episode is now about the history of telecommunications and social interaction.
If someone texts me something mean, I don't text back. I will like basically insist that it's a conversation that we need to have in person. Because I think like the getting into mean text fights is just like one of the most upsetting, like activating things that kind of can happen. And I just don't fucking do it. I put my phone away an hour before bed because crazy ass shit just can come through, and I'm an insomniac.
Yeah.
So a few things like early in a relationship, I have kind of a boundary that I don't, it's like where needs and boundaries get kind of complicated, but it's like stressful for me to not really know somebody and not know what the physical expectations are with them. And so early in a relationship, I'll ask for a lot of communication, and I will communicate a lot. So I know what the expectations are and what we're going to do. And then as I like trust someone more, I'm like, well, we have like a rapport, and I don't feel like I have to do that in quite the same way. But that came up when you asked me about it. And I have a boundary about like disclosing. I've definitely talked about this on this podcast before because it has come up a lot for me. Disclosing about when my partners want to tell me about sexually explicit experiences they've had, or disclosing about problems they're having with other partners that are related to me. All of that is stuff that I can't, like, if you fucking spring that on me, it's going to tailspin me so fast.
You're not saying don't do it. You're saying don't do it without
my consent.
letting you opt into the conversation.
Yeah, let me opt into the conversation. Because I just know that it's like really triggering and upsetting to me. I am realizing that there's like a really long list here, and perhaps I'm going to stop now because I'm going to start getting kind of specific. And this is maybe a good moment to just note that I've had a really rough summer with relationships, and I'm going through like a hard breakup. And to quote Eve 6 from 1998, my tender heart has been put in a blender. I guess it's a paraphrase. It's not a direct quote, but I'm really aging myself a couple of points today. But yeah, I've like had some real time hard experiences around like boundaries, needs, even consent, and certainly telephones, and relationships, substance use. And when you're talking about some of these boundaries, trying to have them and hold them when you're in relationship with people who are struggling with substance abuse, it's like a just constant recircling around to those things, and it gets exhausting. And so, I'm a little tumultuous. I'm not going to promise that I won't cry at some point during this podcast, because I'm still crying most days.
It's either cry or critique capitalism, and both on
a
good episode. Why do you think, out of curiosity, like boundary challenges and substance abuse like kind of go together? Like, why do you like those things?
Yeah. I mean, there is so much to be said about that. And I guess where I would probably start is just with the concept of like codependency, which maybe therapy speak these days is more commonly enmeshment. But codependency is actually a term that was developed to describe the relationship that people, whether it's family members or partners or children, often had with alcoholics, with people who had alcohol problems specifically. So
this is kind of wild, because until you explained this to me, I just thought codependency was like a thing in relationships, not a thing in like relationships with substance abuse. So I guess it's just like integrated into the vernacular as like, you and I are codependent, like we're dependent on each other, but it's actually like you're dependent on alcohol or substances together. That's what it. Okay.
What?
Yeah.
Wait.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Again,
Okay. Tell me more about this.
not an expert, although, sort of anecdotally, lots of
therapist.
experience.
Right.
Personal
Personal experience. But yeah, that is my understanding. And we
Okay.
can kind of look this up and share some of
You're
it.
right.
No research
Don't
needed.
question. I have a boundary against you questioning your authority. Sorry.
Okay. But yeah, that is where that term came from. And so the idea is that like we are kind of in this cycle of addiction and abuse and and impulse control issues together. And that system becomes sort of more and more dependent, toxic, untenable. And a lot of that has to do with boundaries.
Mm-hmm. And
This is, wow. Yeah.
But like the other thing that we're talking about when we use the term codependency, often we're talking about enmeshment. Or like that's a better,
and enmeshment,
broader term.
This idea that like I don't know where my feelings end and yours begin and vice versa. We use the term hall of mirrors on this podcast a lot, which is this tendency to like project out to what you imagine the other person wants from you and then providing that without being in touch with what you need. And then the other person is doing that. And then you're like really far down this hall of mirrors where nobody's actually in touch with what they need, what they want, what their boundaries are. So enmeshment, codependency, the hall of mirrors, they all live in the same neighborhood of like people pleasing and like being sort of your own relationship to self being interrupted and feeling like you kind of have to negate that in some way to be able to stay close to the people that you love.
Like the example that I saw when I was reading about this was like, if you're like trying to leave for work and you're like, I can't find my keys, and you're like looking for your keys, for me, everything just like stops. And I'm like, until Sarah finds her keys, like my life can't go on. It was weird. They had a specific pointed example about you and me on the internet.
I was like, that
No, I'm just kidding.
literally happened on Saturday.
No.
Is that what you're talking about?
No, this was actually another person's
I
example.
was really late for my dance
It
class.
felt dramatic, maybe because of that, because this person was being like, to not be codependent in my relationship, I need to like learn to like just let the person, like I can help them, but I need to learn to like, they're on their own individual journey of finding their keys and getting where they need to go. And it's not mine. We are separate people. And I think it's just kind of that distinction of like knowing there's a line where I begin and I end and you begin.
I want those people's problems. I'm like, I wish
know.
that was where I needed to start with dismantling my patterns of codependency.
And you can see how in a long-term relationship, like if you're, like if you've like brought a really like the like a woman in a heterosexual relationship has brought like a bunch of like maternal attention to the relationship, and like the man is like sort of like a very like high functioning professional, but like personally kind of dysfunctional, like man baby kind of situation. Like this stuff would be big.
Yeah. Okay. And would be indicative of like larger, really powerfully controlling patterns.
And that would be a codependent, or I guess technically speaking, like enmeshed relationship.
To get it back to the idea of boundaries, then in that scenario, maybe the boundaries that you might have with yourself is like when my partner can't find their keys and they're panicking, I can say, hey, I'm going to offer to help. I'll be looking around too, right? But if they like start yelling at you or acting out, that you're just like, okay, I'm going to leave you on your own. I don't want to be treated like this. And you exit the situation. Yeah.
And I think that's a good definition. Another definition that I was reading about is like, just as the simple formula, like when you do X, I will do Y, or if you do X, I will do Y. So as defined, like you're not allowed to lose your fucking keys again. It's like when you lose your keys, I'm going to disengage and like attend to my own things because whatever, this happens every day. And
right. And maybe you know
disruptive.
that like this ends in the person yelling at you.
Right.
And you don't want to be yelled at.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, maybe I'll just add, I think for me, the way that my go-to way of just like understanding sort of how it shows up for me, codependency is I think about when Curtis was still like much earlier in his recovery from having a stroke. And so I was just like super full-time caregiver role. And like, you know, he was home from the hospital, but he had a lot of mobility and health needs and blah, 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 blah. And like, at some point I realized like people would ask me like, so how are you, Jess? And I would just only be able to say how he was and what was going on with his recovery. You know, and at some point someone was like, yeah, and what about you? And I like literally couldn't even locate like how I felt.
Yeah.
Or, like who I was in there. Like I was just totally, you know, overtaken by that identity as like caregiver to him.
Right.
And I was like, oh shit, yeah. I think this is what they're talking about. You know?
It's really hard. And I think when we're talking about like substance use in relationships, which I know all three of us in one case and me in a couple of cases this summer, like had some close encounters with, that is what starts showing up. Like you no longer really understand how you feel about what's happening in the relationship. You only can think about what is going on with that person.
Yeah.
You're just like, what is happening? What's going to happen next? What is like the next shoe that's going to drop? Like what's the next bad thing that might happen? How is all of this going to like, how are they going to behave? What choices are they going to make? And how is that going to impact me? Maybe. But like, it's just becomes almost impossible to like feel yourself.
And like the parallel between those two things, like being a caregiver, like for somebody with a disability and, you know, substance abuse is interesting because I feel like, you know, I can definitely empathize with your experience in that, or sympathize that like, it sort of makes sense that, but at least maybe it's like consistent, like Curtis's needs at that time were, you know, maybe they were like on a trajectory of like lessening, but they were consistent. Whereas somebody who has substance abuse issues is going to be like really erratic in the needs that they bring to you, or like the, you know, the amount that you need to cater to them. It's just like you were saying, it's like a cycle, but it's like you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. This is bringing up, it's kind of meta, but it's bringing up for me another example maybe of boundaries and how they can and can't function. I've been in a lot of relationships since we started this podcast.
Show off.
And, you know, one of the things that will come up in those relationships is what I will or won't talk about on the podcast about the relationships I have. And I'm pretty early on in my relationships. I'm like, I'm a writer. I'm a podcaster. I'm a media maker. My life is the material that I use. My relationships are the material that I use, like my internal world. So I will be doing that. And I will not use any identifying information ever. I'll always respect your privacy and obscure details appropriately. But I will not censor myself around that. And so that's an example of someone like they're consenting into a relationship where I've said that that's true. And then there are like choices to make inside of that reality, which is maybe once you have the experience of me writing or talking about our relationship, you really don't like the way it feels and you don't want to be in the relationship anymore. Or you decide you don't want to consume the media that I make because it's upsetting. Or you ask me to like make some adjustments to the way I talk so that it feels more safe to you, right? Like all of those things are on the table, but the idea that I would just not do it anymore or not do it about a specific relationship is like not on the table. So this is kind of meta, but it's coming up. And so I thought I'd share it to see if it felt like a helpful example.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if the vocabulary matters very much, but like, the need, like it seems like you're talking about like a need, a sort of like positively framed, actively framed, like need to talk about relationships in your podcast and in your art and writing. That like, is that a boundary or a need? It probably doesn't really matter what you're calling it, but then the other person may have a boundary about like how you do that or that you do that, I guess, as well.
But it's like, I mean, I feel like that is there's a boundary that as journalists, we grew very, very familiar with and comfortable with, like exactly how you can work with like a source who needs to have their identity protected, right? If they're a whistleblower, for example, or if they're at risk of, being arrested by ICE or something like that, we have, there's ways that you can tell their story without, revealing information that would put them at risk. And like, there's an understanding that there's value in getting those voices out there because of the information that they're sharing, and so like that applies to your personal storytelling too. Like it's valuable it's also, you get to tell your story, right? And it's very possible and like well established how you can do that without harming the other people involved.
But I think this is where Alex's new favorite term,
misalignment.
Oh, is maybe it's like a good segue into it. Because yes, absolutely. That's just like a very closely held value. It's a truth about my life. Like I will be respectful. I will protect people's identities, and I will also talk freely and I'll be pretty raw about like my life and my relationships and the material that like those things bring up for me to use to explore, because that's who I am. And there are people out there whose like need for privacy is different than mine. And like, it's worth saying that I was also in a relationship this summer where like my digital privacy was violated, and it was a huge deal for me.
Would you call it a boundary violation?
Yeah. So everybody has kind of like different, and I think for this partner, it was like hard to understand why that was so upsetting to me. Right. So everybody has different levels of like tolerance and needs and values around these things. And like, it would not be a good fit for me to be in a relationship with someone who needed a really, really like high level of privacy, and like just security around the idea that like any kind of personal information or intimate information between the two of us was never going to be shared.
So you're saying like it would be valid. It would be a valid boundary for somebody to be like, the idea of my private personal relationships being talked about publicly where people might know who you're referring to, it just doesn't work with me. That's not wrong.
No.
It's just misaligned
Yes.
with your needs.
Exactly. And if they were trying to like put a boundary on me to not do that, I think that it would be like a misappropriation of the term. And in fact, like the boundary should be like, I can't be in a relationship with someone who like talks about their relationships publicly.
Right.
And so if that's not something that's going to change and that's what they're telling me, I should leave this relationship. Right.
And this is just back to what I think of as the most sort of like basic classical thought in therapy. That like you can control your own behaviors and decisions and things like that, but you can't control what other people do.
Which is a real bitch. And I'll tell you what, I still think I'm going to be an exception. And I want to like bring a lot of compassion to myself. And everybody else out there where it's like, you really do feel like that. And I think in love, to get back to polyamory, in love and in sex, like the feelings are so strong and they're so powerful and they feel so important, and they are important, and it can really feel like an exception to that rule. You're like, this is the love. This is the sex. This is the relationship where the person is going to change because it's so good. Right.
They're going to change from a person you're misaligned with to a person that you are.
They're going to change from a person I'm misaligned with because it's so good. Right?
This is the classic, like, I'm going to save them with my love situation.
I could see how we're misaligned, but I'm going to change them. Yeah.
Tale as old as time.
It is a tale as old as time. I like to have...
It's like literally the story of Beauty and the Beast.
Right.
He's a monster and then she changes him.
Is that why they wrote that song?
Tale as old as time.
Song as old as rhyme. I can fix this beast.
I can save him with my love.
I'm realizing my superpower is having just like really predictable pedestrian experiences and then intellectualizing them. Guys, guess what I just realized? I keep trying to change people with my love. Everyone's like, yeah, dude.
Same.
Yikes. But yes, back to that point, I think that's where like being in touch with yourself, having boundaries that you can keep, hopefully will, I don't want to say like guard against, but like allow you to have like more choices and self-awareness in relationships where there might be like profound misalignment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And not start them in the first place?
I don't know. Can you actually, okay. Yeah, and not start them in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing that I've stumbled with in the past is kind of just knowing when to have those conversations in a new relationship. Like, you know, when it's too early to be like obviously you can't just show up on the first date and be like, here's my scroll of boundaries or whatever. Like, here are my needs. Are we misaligned in any way? I guess it's kind of like what dating apps try to do or whatever, or what they use to try to
Yeah, I mean, and I think like, I don't know, you gotta have a little, be kind to yourself here, you know, because it's like, sure, I don't know, falling in love, arguably super basic experience, right? That feels
so basic.
Obvious.
Right? But, you know, and one of the things about it is that it feels like no one has ever felt this way before,
Sure
right?
does,
like,
yeah.
and that's
Yes,
so
it does.
like, I have so much compassion for all of us little humans for just, you know, like
Just
that is what
our
happens.
poor tender hearts just
Yeah.
being tossed in the fucking blender. This is what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And I think it's worth noting that like what we're talking about is like the fundamentals of conflict in relationships. Like almost all conflict in relationships are about misalignment and like, you know, uncovering some sort of misalignment and then like, can you resolve that? And
Or
perhaps,
live with it.
Or live with it, yeah. Or, yeah, maybe resolve is too strong a word, but like, can you live with it, or can those like, you know, those needs or boundaries like change a little bit so that it fits together? Can I better understand you and what you want, and it's like worth it to, you know, change the thing about me or like change what I want.
Yeah, I just
know
wonder if it is possible to change those things about us. You know?
Yeah, I think it is. I just think I mean, the idea that like fundamentally you couldn't, I think this is when you decide to end a relationship. It's because you decide that you can't, but maybe I should give an example.
Yeah. Get me out of here. Please.
So
Rescue me.
The misalignment thing like came up for me recently as like a sort of idea that I was excited about because I had an experience in a relationship where I was dating somebody and like they were uncomfortable with me like sort of starting a new relationship and or maybe like starting a relationship specifically with somebody that they knew. And you know, they kind of in the conversation, like what was essentially the breakup conversation, they sort of like expressed their discomfort with that. And I was like, I hear that. Do I want to like not pursue that because of the wants or needs or like the boundary that this partner has? And I was like, it wasn't about doing the thing that I like really, really wanted to do the thing. It was like about almost like having a boundary about my partner's dictating my behavior outside of the relationship. Like that was the piece that I was like, I can't do that. It's like it's bad for me.
Right.
Right.
It's bad for you to be in a relationship where there's the expectation that your other partners are dictating what you can and can't do.
Yeah, because I'm susceptible to like a lot of like guilt, and I will like build, you know, if I were to sort of like relent to that or like take that step, I would potentially like feel resentment. I would not like, I would not know what was there in these situations that I wanted to pursue. And then I would like imagine, like, I'm so fucking optimistic that I will like imagine that something's going to be great. And if I'm not allowed to do it because of this other partner, then, you know, it's going to remain in that mystery space that
And
like, oh, it was
resentment.
going to be great. It's actually better to me for my other partners if I go do it and then realize it's not that. But, you know, so in that case, I was like, we're misaligned. Like, you don't want me to do this. You're not comfortable with like the level of new relationships that I have or my exploration there. And I don't want to like limit that and be dictated, have my behavior be dictated. And it's like the two things were not exactly like diametrically polar opposite things, but they were like an interaction of those things that just led me to be like, I like kind of felt peaceful about it because I was like, kind of like, oh yeah, we're just misaligned. And if I fight against this, you know, if I do what I just was suggesting a minute ago of like moving towards this person, then we're both going to suffer.
Yeah.
And it's better for us to like not do it.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I appreciate that. And if I may, so that I don't cry, move it out to the collective for a political lesson. I just want to say, like, your ability to hold there just being a lot of truths at once, and that we don't have to battle for the supremacy of one, but that we can use things like self-awareness and boundaries and compassion as a way to just like exist with a lot of them at once. It feels like community care and like really connected to ideas of like mutual aid, that is kind of like sophisticated, and I'm appreciating and hopeful. So thank you.
You mean like staying in community care with people that you decide you're misaligned with?
Yeah. And also just when I think about relationship podcasts, when I think about polyamory in general, when I think about this moment in politics, so much of what we're trying to do is be like, this is what's right and this is what's wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And being this way is wrong and being this way is right. And here's the right way of doing things. And here's the right way of being. And here's like, you know, and I think when we were talking about the weaponization of boundaries, like that's kind of what people are responding to, is just this like very black and white, all or nothing kind of prescribed world where you're just trying to like scrabble onto the side of the person who's more evolved and more correct, instead of just being like, wow, we're all in different places and there are like points of connection here, but there also might be points of misalignment to just like make this type of relationship not possible. It's, you know.
Yeah.
But,
well, and I think like I feel like the misalignment example is also so elegant because it helps you just like see internally that like it's so easy to feel like a breakup is just a referendum on your lovability or attractiveness, worth as a human being, all of these things. But understanding like, oh no, that's like not what this is about. It's about like these
in
other
Alex's
things.
case, it's not what it's about. In my case, it is.
Oh,
But
right. I mean, I know.
just to be really clear.
I'm so sorry. You brought it out to the collective, and it was extremely well observed. And also, I think it's important to know that.
Yeah. And it's hard to feel into that because I don't think that people, we talked about this on the breakup episode a little bit, like have an easy time with this idea. And it's often like this misalignment is often like kind of recouched as
conflict.
Yeah. And as like misbehavior.
And misbehavior.
Right.
Someone's got to be bad.
Yeah.
Someone
I want to
being
like
right,
dial
someone
back a
being
little
wrong.
bit, like not dial back, but like clarify, like in that story that I told, it's not like this person was just like, you can't do this just because. Like it was causing them emotional distress.
It was upsetting
They were
to them.
Which is
uncomfortable,
legit and
unhappy.
valid, and I've been there.
Yes, those are like real
Yeah.
feelings. So it's not just like a I'm putting a boundary on you situation.
No.
Right? It was real feelings. But yeah, it is hard to weather that together in community or whatever and like stay close, because I think it's much easier oftentimes for people to like when they're struggling with how a relationship is going to work or facing the fact that you're misaligned and it needs to end. It's kind of easier to just be like, fuck off.
That person was bad.
That person was bad. With that said, if I may continue, one thing that I learned in like kind of researching this and thinking about this specific instance is that it's also not fair to like keep your boundaries quiet at the beginning until it's too late and the person already has feelings. Me too, dude.
I'm bad at that.
Hard same. And that was just yesterday I was like realizing like, there is a reason for this person to be like a little bit pissed at me because like maybe I didn't represent clearly enough like what my like needs and boundaries were up front and like let them get deeper emotionally engaged with me, you know, and then kind of rolled that stuff out.
It's tough though because you have to be in communication with honest communication with yourself about those boundaries before you can be with someone else, and that's why therapy is so valuable, everyone.
That's right.
Because that is my problem. Like there are parts of my shadow that are really hard for me to look at, and so I avoid them. And those are areas where I'm like not in good communication with myself. And so I don't always know what my boundaries are. I don't always know what's going to be hurtful. I don't always know what's going to be like profound misalignment until I'm there. And that I think is also just part of the learning that we're risking with each other, which is why I feel bad for all of our tender blender hearts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And if you have like sort of people pleasing tendencies, it's easy to be like, I just want to like be what this person wants.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think for those of us who were, for various reasons, often if we come from families that have histories of addiction or mental illness, or were parentified as children, which means we were expected to be emotionally mature before it was developmentally appropriate because we were being raised by people who had challenges with emotional maturity, then you have been trained to do this. Like from your earliest understanding of relationships, you have been trained to try and figure out what you're supposed to be for a person to receive the care you need to survive. And that is really, really hard to dismantle. And I would argue, and I don't say it, see, now this is where I'm going to start crying. I told you guys this was going to happen. I don't think we actually dismantle it.
No.
I think we just learn to live with it and and try and use like some of these terms and ideas to live in better relationship with it. But I don't really think, I'm 45 and I find a way to circle back around to these same themes over and over again. I find very creative ways to do that.
Like the same original family attachment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like the wounding, the pleasing, the wanting to be what I imagine the person wants me to be so that I can get the care that I'm craving, but not knowing how to communicate what that care even is.
Yeah.
Probably because like I was too young to actually communicate it when I wasn't getting it. Right. So I don't think that any of this is going to change that for me, but I think it will hopefully keep putting me in better relationship with it and give me better tools for talking about it, which is then comfort at this particular moment, but it is what I've got.
Well, and if that's like where you're, if it's like driven by your survival instincts, that's fucking intense. And even if it's driven by your like family of origin interactions, those are like, in most cases, sort of presumed to be unending.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, like people, go no contact with their families and become excommunicated and stuff like that. But like, generally speaking, everybody's behaving inside of a family when you're a kid. Like, we're all stuck here together. And so we're going to like treat each other this way. So getting trained on that and then moving that stuff into a realm where we can break up is like kind of crazy too.
It's horrifying.
Right? Like
it's really, really scary. Yeah.
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 I think like confronting this has made me kind of for the first time since we've been poly being like, Oh, I see why people wouldn't want to just start
Yes.
fucking relationships in the first place.
Yes.
Because
And like, why
it's
in God's
treacherous.
name would you want to have so many of them?
Mm-hmm.
You're like, you know,
You're talking to me specifically. I don't know.
I was yelling at myself. You know, because
Yeah.
the stakes, this is not universally true, but I do think for folks who are, have attachment wounding, are exploring that through relationships, the stakes can feel really high. And it's very challenging material.
Yeah.
I wanted to get the fuck out of this area where I'm going to keep crying to talk about an example from our last podcast about like misalignment.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I talked about in our last podcast was being in relationships with people who, where there are metamors who won't ever meet me or feel a lot of animosity towards me.
In spite of having not met you.
Yeah. Which, you know, for someone who is a people pleaser.
I just want to like ring a little triangulation
really.
triangle over here.
Fucking, really hard to live with.
It's weird that you would know that they had a lot of animosity towards you when you had never actually talked to them.
How did I know
How's
that?
that happen?
I'm like, give me a chance. They'll love me. I swear. I'll figure out how to make them love me.
In spite of not ever being in direct contact with them.
Cool. So I didn't get out of the space where I was going to start crying. Let me try that again.
Okay. And I have a way I want to completely change the subject. So let me know. Just
Fucking great.
give the distress signal.
A lot of people contacted me and they were like, hey, it's not actually fair to demand that metamors like be in relationship with you or have contact with you or try and like control their feelings about you. And I was like,
People said that in response to what you were saying.
Yes.
It's not fair.
Yeah, like it's not, it was an example maybe of me like trying to control people that I can't control. You know?
Well, like they're allowed to not want to be.
They cannot like me.
Sure.
Let me finish this example.
Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
They cannot like me. They cannot want to meet me, right? That is their business. There's nothing I'm going to do that's going to be able to like change their behavior. Back to Jessica's like therapy 101. We can only change our own behavior. We can't change other people's, right? And so I was like sitting with that because I was like, oh, like I feel like appropriately called out or called in, if you will. And I was like that, you know, that is good feedback. That's like a reasonable critique. And it was probably an example of me like having a low tolerance for people not liking me. Which I do have a low tolerance for, which is funny considering some of the things that I do professionally. But
but you're also delightful.
thanks, Jess. But I think it's a misalignment thing. This is where I'm like coming back to your example is like, yeah, that's fine. Like people can feel that way. You can practice poly any way that you want. You can practice poly in a million different compartments if you want. You can, you know, all of that stuff. The boundaries that I needed to hold in some of these examples is like, I don't want to fucking hear about it, right? It's painful to me.
There you go. Okay.
I don't want to fucking hear about how these people don't like me or how I am like a problem in your other relationships. That is going to send me into a tailspin, and it's not really like something I want to hear unless, you know, you can ask me and then we can discuss that. My answer is probably going to be no.
Yeah.
You know, but whatever.
Okay.
So like that's a boundary and I
Yeah.
can hold it. And if you're talking to me in that way and I don't like it, I can leave. I can be like, we're stopping this conversation. I'm out of here, right? There's also a possibility of misalignment here, which is just like community and like community engagement and transparency is just like a really closely held value of mine. And I want to be in relationships where those relationships can like share community. And it's okay if that's not important to you, but we might be misaligned in our relationship.
Yeah.
So I was just using this as an example.
I really like
of
that
like
example
two different things.
because I feel like you're saying that like, so yeah, there could be in the place where you end up where you're like, we're just too misaligned and it's like not sort of worth it to try to fight through this. But you also could be in the place where, you're like, it's very important. I think it's totally fair for you to be like, it's very important for me that like I know my metas and I get to like meet my metas. And then if the other person is like, that's not on the table, then, your sort of compromise position is like, okay, then I don't want to hear about them or their feelings towards me. Like that's a potentially like
I was fine with hearing about them. I just didn't want to hear that they hated me.
Yeah, that's like a generative solution where you're both like kind of compromising a little bit. So I don't know. I like it.
Yeah, thanks.
And so do you.
But I just use that because I think it's a good example of how like needs, boundaries, and alignment can all kind of show up in a scenario in a relationship. And I think one of the things that's hard about all of those is like the answer to them may not be something you like, you know? And I think that's why boundaries are hard, is because you said at the top of the session, wow, no, at the top of the podcast.
This is how Sarah gets hurt there.
Yeah.
You said at the top of the podcast that people experience boundaries as distance, right? As a way of like distancing yourself from them. Any therapist worth their salt is going to say boundaries are a way for you to have closer relationships, not more distant ones, because it's people being in more authentic communication with each other about how the relationship can work and be intimate. Instead of someone blowing past their boundaries or blowing past their needs and creating this like hall of mirrors relationship where you're just like in this state of kind of like low grade panic and resentment, if I may, describe my own personal relationship hell. But getting there means that, the outcomes may not be what you want. It may be that you have to end a relationship where you really love somebody and where there are elements of the relationship that you are going to miss terribly. It may be that like the type of relationship that you can have with this person is really different than the one you yearn for. It's like being in touch with what you need. And like, I'll use the example of addiction because that's like on my mind right now for a variety of reasons. It may be that you can't be in romantic and intimate relationship with someone who is experiencing active addiction. And that sucks because that doesn't mean you don't love the person, right? It doesn't mean you don't care about them. It doesn't mean that there aren't elements of the relationship that you're really missing, But if I'm being honest with myself, like I have to blow past too many boundaries. I'm in a state of codependence. I'm probably enabling them. It's not healthy.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why these things are hard. And like in the example, like a community example that we all have experienced, someone was in really active addiction and we were really, really worried about them, like love them deeply, very, very scared for their safety. And because of the mental health challenges and the addiction cycle that they were experiencing, they were communicating with us in extremely abusive ways.
Right.
And so we had to like check in with ourselves and be like, we cannot engage with this person when they are being abusive, even though we're desperate to know that they're alive.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why this shit gets fucking hairy. And like, it's not like the world of boundaries is a world of like, I'm imagining like a Lisa Frank binder, just like rainbows and dolphins, And when a therapist says like, this allows you to have relationships that are more authentic and actually closer, it's not because that looks like a Lisa Frank binder either, So that's, I think, why boundaries get like sort of misunderstood and misapplied, because the actual like work of them is about not always getting what you want and learning how to be okay with that.
And everybody involved has to like believe that they exist and that people are entitled to have them. Right.
Possibly related, I think that Lisa Frank was revealed to be using like really, really fucked up labor practices.
No, of course.
I believe there's a documentary about it.
Okay.
Incredible. I was like, is that statement going to end with lots and lots of hallucinogens?
Yeah.
Damn it.
That's
Child labor.
That too.
That's too bad.
Yeah. Okay. I want to, if we have time, shift gears a little bit to talk about rules. Because I think, and kind of like pivot to like, we've been talking a lot about like kind of like our newer relationships and like forming new relationships with people and like their sort of like alignment and endurance and, how to make all that work on the front end. But then it's also very common for, I think, people who are opening a long relationship to like delve into this realm and like struggle to understand like what are the boundaries and rules and like what do we do as a collective, as like two people together, where that collective is like really, or that couple, this sort of like couple primacy, and like there's lots of like critiques of that and stuff to talk about around hierarchy that we've done on other episodes, blah blah blah. I want to just kind of blow past that a little bit to be like, this is the thing that people are experiencing, and they're considering opening relationships that are like very stable, perhaps enmeshed or codependent relationships, perhaps quite healthy. And I think a thing that is common for them to do is be like, well, let's just have some rules about what we do or don't do, right? Like we only go out on dates together, or we only have sex with other people when we're in the same room, or we only have sex with other people when we're in different rooms, or we don't do sleepovers, or we always use condoms, or like there are a lot of those kinds of rules. And I guess I'm just kind of like curious, thinking about like, what is the difference there? And is that like, is it possible for like two individual people to have the same set of boundaries like facing the world? Because I think that's what's kind of assumed in that. And certainly like you and I like did a fair amount of that, made a fair amount of those assumptions when we opened our relationship.
It's a great question, Alex. I've not really thought about that before, but my first gut instinct is no. I think
you can't.
They cannot. I think that boundaries are probably pretty, I hate individualism, but I think that they're probably pretty individual. And the idea that you would find some sort of like perfect alignment inside any relationship around that, as facing out into the world, I don't think so. That's my first gut instinct. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it's funny. The first like sort of image that came up for me was couples who like go on a diet together.
Yeah, it's a thing for sure. Yeah,
or like take up jogging together. Not like they met and fell in love over a mutual shared love of jogging. Right. So yeah, I mean, what is my point? It strikes me that no, I mean, like, of course, I think you can come up with a negotiation between the two of you for what's going to work. But to me, like setting up those kind of external rules together feels like sort of an expression of an enmeshed thing where you're pretending that like, we're going to go out in the world in our matching tracksuits and eat exactly the same number of calories per day.
Okay, so first of all,
jog 6 miles or whatever. Sorry, I'm like mixing things up.
Alex and I often are dressed exactly the same, and so
keep your comments in your pocket.
we actually
intentionally.
But when we were at that protest yesterday, when I took that photo of us, we were just like both. You had like Chingle Migra shirt on. I had like the Chingle Migra button. Everyone was wearing black jeans, our keffiyehs, sunglasses. It's just like, this is ridiculous.
Well, when the color palette is just grays and dark blues,
and black.
It coincides a lot. The Bloodstones too.
So what do couples do? Opening up, like, if you can't actually have some cohesive, coherent, perfectly matched set of boundaries as a couple, and you're opening up, like, what do you do? What rules are allowed? How do you express boundaries?
I mean, I think what this took me a long time, and I think it was like not that long ago that I had like a little bit of a revelation that like I needed to work on understanding what my own needs were independently of yours or ours together and the needs of our relationship. And that if
see the last 4 seasons of
exactly.
podcast, and that's pretty much all we were talking about.
And if all I was doing, if my like externally presented needs and boundaries were actually like ones that we had negotiated together and were like derived from our loyalty to each other, that was going to be a challenge, right? Yeah. And like it's entirely possible that those will like be not perfectly aligned in all realms, but in some realms. Like it might be that we are both like, yes, what feels good to me is and safe to me is to like always use barriers with partners outside of our relationship. And like there have been times when we were like, you know, really aligned on that and that felt good to both of us, for both of us. And then there have been times when that has like changed in one individual relationship or not. I don't know if that's the like best example, but like
sure. That's something that comes up a lot, definitely in polyamory.
Yeah. So, and this is the really good like advice that I think I found online too, was like a couple needs to, as individuals, work on identifying what their individual needs are before they think about like, you know, coming up with rules. And then, you know, those like your boundaries, your individual boundaries will like stem from what those needs are. And then you will like negotiate the way that your relationship will interact with others.
Right.
So like, for example, like I have a need to like have an emotionally peaceful, like day-to-day existence. And so I have a boundary that I don't want to talk about your other relationships without us, you know, other than at a specifically determined time or without consent, like you were saying. I mean, there's like a million possible examples, but like, you're right that they're like rooted in the individual, and like being an individual with needs is scary.
Because they might not be met. I think that's like one of the things that I keep coming back to here is expanding our tolerance for the idea that like you might have a boundary that you have to hold all the way to ending a relationship.
Right.
You might have a need that cannot be met in a relationship that you want to keep in your life.
Yeah.
There is a lot of discomfort here. And I think one of the reasons why we hide from our own boundaries and needs is because one of the reasons I hide from them is because I'm afraid of that reality of like being confronted with the possibility that like they won't be met or they won't be respected by someone that I love. Right. And that is so scary that I'd rather like not even communicate them to myself. And that's why when relationships end, Jessica, to your point, that's why it feels like a referendum on your very lovability, right? Yeah. Is because you've tied other people's ability to like meet your needs and respect your boundaries with your own value. Yeah. And then like have a low tolerance for it not working out the way you want it to. Right. You know?
And that's why you shouldn't obscure your needs on the front end.
Right. Dude, I know that.
I'm talking to me.
I don't do it, but I know it.
I already know that.
But it's so hard.
But I did it anyway.
You know that, and also it's so hard to know your own needs.
Yeah. And sometimes we are learning them in the relationships, as I was saying. Right?
And I guess maybe this is one of the last things I wanted to hit on is the power of articulating your own boundaries and holding them, and the power of them recognizing that they're perhaps flexible.
Yeah.
So those are two contradictory ideas, but like, you know, I think the thing that I have a hard time doing, but I'm always kind of like relieved when I do in any given relationship or situation is being like, you know, I have like setting a boundary with a person or like really articulating like a need that is like scary to me. It will feel scary because I'm like, well, maybe they're not going to be okay with this. Maybe everybody's going to be unhappy. And
they might leave me.
Or, you know, this like came up in this last week when I was like in with a group of people in like a sort of like potentially like group sex situation. And I was like, I don't want to interact. Like I articulated like a boundary that like I didn't want to interact with anybody except for the partner that I was there with. And
then what happened?
Well, let me finish.
I could just by the look on your face. Yeah. Keep going.
It felt like an older version of me, a different version of me would have been like, and did at one point be like, whatever happens is fine.
Whatever happens. My least favorite
I'm
phrase
cool.
when it comes
Let's
to sex.
just see what happens.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll be fine with whatever. And like instead, perhaps because of the experience of how badly that went, I was like, I don't think, let me set this boundary. And then like seeing my partner and the other people who were there like receive that and be like, okay, like was very like sort of validating and affirming, like, oh, like these people care about me enough that I'm like allowed to have a boundary. And even if it's like a little bit of a bummer. And then, yes, to your question, that made me more comfortable with them. Right. And then I was like, you know what, actually, maybe that would be fun. And so, and there's one framing that's like, just, I abandoned my boundary, but it didn't feel like that. I was like, this is a flexible, it felt more flexible.
Yeah.
Also an example of how boundaries can help us be closer to people because it helps us feel safer inside ourselves and with each other.
Yeah.
And so maybe even opens up more possibilities for intimacy that we can't see without being shown that we can hold our own boundaries and people that we love will respect them and stay close. And I wanted to say about abandonment.
I was going to say some sexy shit about kissing men, but okay. So let's talk about
no. Sorry, that's what the audience wants. Please go ahead.
No, I just wanted to like kind of like explore also the idea of like our like growth edge in this context. Because like another thing that happened in this situation is like one of the people there was kind of like, I asked them like, how are you with kissing men? And they were kind of like, this was a man. And they were kind of like, oh, I'm not that into it. And then like we sort of like ended up kissing some and it was great for me. But so I guess maybe this is a bad example because I'm speaking for another person. But I think sometimes there can be things that you like haven't experienced before that you're sort of like, your assumption might be, depending on what kind of person you are, I don't like that. And you don't really know, and you might want to like kind of push into your growth edge a little bit and, with a lot of care for yourself, but also a lot of like,
right.
I don't know.
Yeah. Like permission to stop or, not do it until like the moment when you feel like you really, really want to do it.
Yeah. And thus like having a boundary and those boundaries being allowed to have your boundaries change, I think is what I'm saying is like, that's the most important thing. And that's when you feel like good and loved.
And safe,
Safe
enough to risk this whole heart blender situation.
Yeah. So abandonment. I feel like there's a segue.
No, I was just going to say that fear of being left, it's not just the fear of being left physically, because I know that this can come up a lot in relationships and poly relationships where it's like you have a partner who's like, I'm never going to leave you. I'm not going to leave you. Not that that's something that someone can promise, right? But there is also like the fear of an emotional abandonment that like you'll ask for something or not be able to provide. Usually for me, it's also not being able to provide something for someone. And as a result, they will abandon me emotionally and they'll like stay with me physically but like turn away from me because I'm not giving them something essential that they want.
Interesting.
And I just wanted to like name that mostly because it was just kind of palpable as we were talking. And I thought maybe other people in our audience could relate to that feeling. Speaking of boundaries, we should end this episode because our audience will be shocked to hear I have an Al-Anon meeting to get to.
Why?
Sounds like a punchline to this episode, but is actually factually true.
I will record a podcast with you guys on Monday morning, but if it goes up to the time when my band practice starts, I will leave.
Okay.
The podcast episode.
You're going to put that boundary
And
on
that's
us,
what
huh?
I'm going to do in a minute. And
It's called a rock and roll boundary.
Oh my God.
My boundary is that I get to shred. Speaking of taking space, we are going to go on a short break. This is our season finale for season 4. Yeah. So we will be back in the fall with season 5, which is amazing. There's a lot of material. You can explore our ample back catalog during the short break. Some deep tracks. And thank you so much.
We're not those people anymore, so.
No,
That's true, yes. Oh my God.
Totally
Don't
transformed.
listen to episode 2 for the love of God.
Whatever you do.
Wow, so embarrassing. Hopefully we will do enough of these that those will just like drop off the back end of the feed. Somehow.
Or only they'll become
Yeah,
like
right.
anthropologically interesting to the like 3 super
Yes.
fans that we eventually develop
Right.
in year 10.
Yeah. So thank you so much for listening to Mistakes Were Made all season long and this episode. And in the meantime, send us ideas for next time. We'll be doing some planning for what we do next season. So if there's anything we've missed or we've talked about wrong, don't leave us. Don't abandon us. Just give us another chance. Tell us what your
needs are, and let's see if we can
we'll
meet them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we're misaligned, maybe we can come up with a compromise.
Exactly. Wow, we sound so fucking desperate right now.
Yeah.
You know what? I
This
don't
is why
care
we need
if
to
you
take
listen
some
to it.
space.
Yeah.
This is why we need to take space.
We
I love you guys.
codependent with the audience. We're going to take some space.
Good luck out
Love
there. See you soon.